Hi, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about what I consider to be a hot topic, how to find a perfect man. Now, I know that many people feel like there's no perfect man. So let me be straight to the point. It's how to find a perfect man for you. I've been wanting to share on this topic for a while now, and this is my second video, and I'm using my iPhone 10. I recently purchased a Canon 80D, but getting it set to the right settings and everything that I need in setting it up. I got so much equipment, yet I don't know how to quite use it yet, so bear with me. Hopefully my next video will be on my 80D or my the G7X Mark II, which I also have. However, let's jump into this topic. I've found the perfect man for me, and I know that so many of you are still holding out, hoping to find the perfect man for you. Some of you have gone through a couple of marriages and you have a lot of residual pain as a result of divorce happening in your life. I always say that, divorce is not a breakup. It's a tear. Tears don't heal easy. I really feel for those of you who have gone through that kind of emotional separation and pain, because I know it's not easy. Even though I have never experienced it, I have counseled a number of people throughout my 30 years in ministry. I pastored for 22 years, and I've heard stories, not only from women, but from men as well, of, the constant pain that they go through. And it affects their current relationships. Some of them won't even get into relationships because of a bad breakup. I know a man who thinks all women are no good because of a woman who messed around on him when he was married to her. This was probably 20 years ago, but he still feels that way right now. So any relationship he gets in, it's just basically a glorified booty call. It's never going to amount to anything because he has a preconceived idea of how all women are based on one woman and a divorce that caused him a lot of pain. They were both young when this happened. I'm sure she experienced pain too. But let's get to the topic at hand. How do you find a perfect man? Let me tell you how I found mine. I too was in a number of relationships. In fact, I had 2 or 3 marriage licenses. I can't even really remember. It's been so many broken promises and relationships with men who I thought I would end up marrying. And it wasn't that they didn't want to marry me. 2 of them was because I realized after getting those marriage licenses that these were not men who I felt like I could be with for the rest of my life. And if you feel like if you're with someone and you feel like you can't be with that person for the rest of your life, then you have no business marrying that person. You got to at least feel like you love that person and you can see yourself spending the rest of your life with them. If not, then you need to let that person go. If they're looking for marriage and you're looking for marriage, you don't have the right person. I know there are times when people marry for security, financial security, sometimes because someone has a home and they want a house. They feel like they're never going to get a house any other way. That simply is not true. There are other ways to get a home, but sometimes we try to take shortcuts and get in relationships that we shouldn't. For me, I went through these bad relationships, and it was my very last relationship with a man prior to me giving my life to the Lord Jesus Christ. That relationship liked to destroy me. In fact, I had become so down. I'd gotten to the point that I was depressed. I didn't want to go outside. And when I returned from Pennsylvania, where I lived with this guy who had promised to marry me, he was not telling the truth, and I didn't know it. But when he told me he wanted me to leave and go back to my apartment in New York City, in fact, he said to me, I need space. I left with my 9-month-old baby and packed everything in my car, left, took off, went back to New York. I was brokenhearted. I was distraught. I was down, and I was determined to get that man back. I went through a lot, to the point that I went to psychics to try to get readings to find out if I was going to get him back. All I wanted to hear was I was going to get this man back. And I just had started a relationship with God. This was about 1990. And I was reaching out to God because I was so down. I had told my story over and over to the friends that I had in New York, to the point where nobody wanted to hear it anymore. All they said to me was, get over it. It's over. He told you that he needed space. He broke up with you. Get over it. I couldn't get over it like that. Sometimes you just can't just say, okay, that's it in your mind or in your heart. Well, I cried out to God day in and day out for 2 months in that house, until one day God answered me. At first I thought I cracked up. I did. I thought, oh my God, I'm crazy. But then I thought to myself, I'm not crazy. I know what day it is. I know where I'm at. I still have sound mind. And from that moment, after God spoke to me, there was a peace that was in my spirit that I cannot explain. That all of a sudden, that pain that was so heavy on me lifted. Now, the desire to still be with that man was still there. But what I heard God say to me was, you'll have another chance. And that stopped me from crying. Now, that's because I took it as he meant that I was going to have another chance with that man. See, what I was praying was that God would restore the relationship with him. And I thought that was what was going to happen, but it didn't. And, some years later, I discovered that it wasn't really that man who broke up the relationship with me, even though he told me he wanted space and he wanted me to leave. It was God who was ending that relationship between me and him, because he knew that, first of all, the man would not marry me, and that wasn't the man that God had for me. He just wasn't. And sometimes we have to stop wanting people and getting married to people that we really don't know if that's the person that God intended for us to be with. There's a whole lot of pain and suffering that we would spare ourselves if we would just go to God and ask God, who is the man that you have for me? Who did you create for me? And I'm telling you guys, even though I said how to find the perfect man, this is also how to find the perfect woman, because this information that I'm giving you is applicable to you as well. I found the perfect man through trusting God and waiting on him. I prayed with him, and while I was waiting for God to bring that man into my life and me into his, God turned my life around. He healed me of that pain. He restored me. He blessed me. He gave me a home. He gave me 2 cars. He showed me all the gifts and the talents and the things that I was in me that I didn't even know were there. I mean, I knew I was smart. I knew I'd been to college. I knew that I had a good business mind. I was had an income tax business. In fact, I started doing income taxes when I was 17 years old. I used to do them that before the electronic software came out. I was doing it longhand on paper. When you would fill out those forms that was in the booklet, that's what I was doing. And that's how I was making my money. And then when the electronic software came out, by then I had built up a book of business. And finally, when God told me to retire from doing taxes, 30 years had passed. I had loved doing it. But there was much more that was in me. I didn't know that God had a call on my life until he told me that he wanted me to be a pastor. He called some people in my life that I was to be an overseer for, and I have had those women in my life for 22 years, and they're still here. We have traveled throughout the United States on assignment for God. This is not about religion, y'all. This is about a relationship. The best person to find out who your husband or wife is from God. Now, in order to find out from God, you're going to have to start a relationship with him. This is not where you can go sit down, take God out to dinner, or sit at your dinner table and just ask God. And when he tells you, then you just go on living however you want and just ignore him. No, God is too sweet for you to ignore. And you know what? Why wouldn't you want to know the person who created you? The person who is deeply in love with you. There's so much we don't know about God. And I discovered as I walked with him that having a relationship with him wasn't religion. Religion is man-made. That's some man who created how you should live. No, you have to live according to God's word. If you read that beautiful love letter called the Bible that he wrote for you, you'll see how he thinks and how he feels about you and what he would do for you. There's so many promises. I came into this world a sickly child. I had chronic asthma, diagnosed with IBS, and a whole host of other issues I had. During my walk with God, I reminded him of his promise when he said that by his stripes I am healed. In other words, he provided, the provision for healing for me was already there. I just needed to believe it and to receive it into my life. And let me tell you something, I'm not a chronic asthmatic no more. I don't have IBS no more. There's so many things that God did for me. I was broke with poor credit, and he gave me a house with no money, a big 10-room house in Waterbury, Connecticut. And then after he gave me that house, the first year, I told him, Lord, I need to refinance because this is high. The interest rate was high. He said to me, why? This house is paid for. That was because 2 years later, he gave me the money to pay the house completely off. That house was paid off in 3 years. The house was $110,000. I had a 0 mortgage. Then he gave me another house, another 10-room house, a couple of blocks away from the house that I was living in. He gave me the money for that. I paid that and opened up a clinic for women in crisis. I'm here to tell you that God is awesome. Now back to my story. So all this time I'm praying and just doing what God want me to do. God, what do you want me to do? I make myself available to you. By the time I went to my third assignment, which was to San Antonio, Texas, I'm going to a city that I didn't even know existed, to be honest with you. I knew Dallas. I heard of Houston, but I never heard of San Antonio. I mean, people still can't believe that. I had to look on a map to find out where San Antonio is. I asked God where was my next assignment, and he told me in San Antonio. I went and looked on the map, and that's when I knew, oh, San Antonio's in Texas. So I picked up my house, my kids, my team, the ladies, and we all went to Texas, to San Antonio. In fact, I moved there without a place to live. It didn't matter because I had more than enough money that I could find a place to live. And I did that very day. I got a corporate apartment that was already furnished because my stuff was on its way in big trucks. But when I got there, shortly after I got there, I was talking to God one day, and he said to me, you will meet your husband in Texas. I said, I was grateful. I was thankful. However, I went on, doing what I was called to do. And at that time, I was trying to I had found an office space. I needed to get some business phones for my office. I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to go set up my tax business and wait to see where God wanted me to open the church at. Well, I found the office space, but I needed the business phone. So I went on the internet, and while looking for business phones, I filled out some online form, and about 15, 20 minutes later, this lady called and began to talk to me about the phones, and it was the price range that I was looking for, and I thought it was really wonderful, the phones. It was a VoIP, I guess they call that VoIP phone. And she said someone would come out to my house. She scheduled an appointment, and she told me the guy's name. His name was Michael. Well, I don't know if it was the next day or the day after that, but Michael came to my house, brought the phone with him. I opened the door, and here was this tall man. He was a good-looking guy, but I really didn't pay attention to that because my mind was on something else. However, I, told him to come in. He came in, and we sat at my kitchen table, and we started to talk about the phone, and immediately God had dropped in my spirit that this man was displaced, that he shouldn't be selling phones. And when I told him that, he said, you're right. His eyes dropped, his face dropped, well, his head dropped down. And he said, I'm not supposed to be doing this. You're absolutely right. So we began to talk about the phone. Then we started talking about other things, like music, because he loves music, jazz. Long story short, we became really good friends. I met his family. And in fact, we became thick as thieves for the next 12 years. But somewhere around 2010, God told me through a prayer warrior that this was my husband. When we both met each other, initially we were not attracted to each other. Not that way. We liked each other as people, and we had a good time with each other. However, it wasn't love at first sight. That's what I'm trying to say to you. Long story short, our friendship went on. It grew. I would talk to him about the Lord, and when I would talk to him, I would see that his eyes would light up. He ended up giving his life to the Lord too. Now, here's the kicker. When I told Michael, in fact, when I found out from God that he was my husband, God told me not to say anything. That was a big mistake. I went and made. It wasn't a mistake for God to tell me that, but my mistake was I went and I told Michael. Because Michael, at that point, wasn't interested in getting married. He had never been married. He was in his 50s, and he wasn't interested in marriage. Sure, he liked me as a person, and I don't know to what extent, but what I'm saying to you is God had spoke and said this man was my husband. And I had to just allow God. God said, I will surely bring it to pass. I had to let God bring it to pass, and that is exactly what happened. So, on March 26, 2018, Michael and myself got married. We had a nice wedding. His family was there. We had a great time. And you know what the wonderful part about this is that not only was Michael my best friend when I married him, but he's the person that God gave to me. Let me tell you something that maybe you don't know. When you marry the person that God gives you, there's 3 people in that marriage. It's you, the man, and God. And if he gave you that person, you know what they say when a person gets married, whom God joins together, no man can put asunder. Because that was the man God chose, and because I was the woman that God chose for him. If I have a problem, or if there's something going wrong in my marriage, I can go to God and say, God, this is your marriage, in fact. This is the marriage that you gave me, Michael, and you gave me to him. I can always get God to help in any situation because it is the person that he brought to me. Just like he brought Adam to Eve, actually Eve to Adam. It's a God-ordained marriage. What happens is it's 3 people in the marriage because whatever God calls or whatever God begins, he keeps, he takes care of. He gives provision for us to take care and love each other. In fact, I don't even have to worry about the love dying because God provided the love for me and for him and vice versa. That's why you need to let God take you to the man because you don't have to worry about what this man is going to become 5 years later. Sure, he looks nice now. Sure, he's treating you nice and taking you out and being sweet and he's laughing. But what about 3 years from now or 5 years from now? You don't know that man's future. You don't know if he will end up becoming an alcoholic or end up being abusive. You don't know. But if you get him from God, the Bible said every good and perfect gift comes down from the Father of the heavenly lights. God is not going to give you anything that is bad. I just wanted to share this with you. Michael and I will be together because God is in this relationship with the both of us. A 3-fold cord is not easily broken. That's scripture. Look it up. I hope this helps you. If you want to ask me anything, feel free to leave a comment. God bless you. And you know what? I always have a problem telling people to like and subscribe. I always forget. I'll remember. But please like and subscribe and share this with somebody you know that needs it. Because there's a lot of people out here who have given up hope about having a husband or for a man, a wife. Don't give up hope. Just go to God and he will show you where your mate is. Talk to you soon. Bye.